There's a very there's a very troubling group in Britain called Al-Mujahirun. They're a very, very radical Islamist group. They're forever making extremist statements. In Britain, we showed that they're connected to more terrorism cases of prosecutions in the UK than Al-Qaeda have been. They're a very, very radical, very extreme, very dangerous group. We successfully petitioned my organisation to get them made illegal a little while ago, and it's perfectly clear they were breaking the law. And after a meeting where they reformed and assaulted a colleague of mine. Anyhow, this group Al-Mujahirun is a very good example of where our governments are getting it wrong, because Al-Mujahirun is going to, again in a few days in Britain, use the 2-minute silence on the 11th of November, on the day of armistice, to shout and abuse the British Army and to burn poppies, which in Britain, as you may know, is a symbol of remembrance of our fallen from the 2 world wars. Now, they did this last year as well, and they've done it a number of times before. This, to me, would be a very pertinent thing to consider when considering where to draw the lines of so-called hate speech and such behaviour. Because Al-Mujahirun have so far been protected by police whilst they're doing this. Now, 2 years ago in a town north of England, there were returning troops coming back from Afghanistan, and this group, Al-Mujahirun, abused them in the street, held up placards calling them baby killers and so on. And again, they were protected by the police. Locals were very, very angry indeed, and the police made sure that Al-Mujahirun were able to keep going with their protests and so on. Now the reason I highlight this is for the very key reason, because the behavior of the police in protecting Al-Mujahirun and protecting their alleged right to abuse British soldiers and to abuse the memory of British soldiers led itself to a new problem, which was a group that formed in response called the English Defence League. This is a so-called grassroots movement, mainly working class British people, concerned about these issues. But they themselves have now caused a lot of problems. They go to have big demonstrations in areas often which are very Muslim, and there are often clashes. So-called anti-racism groups, which tend to be extremists themselves, extreme leftists, turn up, and there are pitched fights and battles, and all sorts of terrible things happen. I cite this for a reason. I don't have the answer to this, but I think it should be considered at least very seriously by the police, whether they aren't contributing themselves to the problem. Because I don't think that the EDL would exist if the police had not responded the way they did to Al-Mujahirun. The perception that they were not defending a legal right, but they were protecting people who were breaking laws, embedded itself, and now we have another problem on the back of that. So
I was in a debate recently, and I defended the British Defence League. And I did that on the basis of a program on Danish television where the leader or whatever, he talked about the organization, and I got a pretty good impression of him. But now I realize, on the basis of what you just said, that I shouldn't support the British Defence League. Is that correct?
This is a very important question. I have had quite a tortured track record on this one for the following reason, which is that I've said for a long time that one of my great fears in Europe generally, but in my country in particular, would be that in the end, decent ordinary people, if the mainstream politicians didn't finally address these questions, decent ordinary people would find themselves stuck between Islamic fascists and other fascists, fighting it out between themselves. Now, I say that as a general point. However, on the question of the English Defence League, this is a very, very complex one. I'm not making a definitive point on this, although every time I say that about the English Defence League, some far leftist or Islamist organisation says that I'm saying something supportive of them. So, when they first started, I was doing an interview in East London, and they found out I was there, and they came and tried to speak to me. And I said at that time they were all sort of what I would describe as skin-headed types of a kind that the British National Party, that is a racist, fascist party. The British National Party, they looked of that type. And we didn't really know anything about the English Defence League at the time. But I said to them, I don't want to see you, go away. And I said it, I have to admit, in slightly stronger language. And they said, we're not the British National Party. And I said, well, look, I spend a lot of my life criticising politicians who say, but, Mr. Qaradawi came in, he seemed nice and so on, and he promised he wasn't an Islamic fundamentalist, and I say, I could spend a lot of my time criticising politicians for being naive on that one, so I'm afraid if you just say to me, you're not, I just don't know, I don't know who you are, what you are. But as I wrote it somewhere at the time, one of them said to me, we understand, we'll leave you alone, we just want to say we're just British working class guys who hate the fact that we're losing our country. And if you're a member of, I don't like thinking of it myself, I'm pretty, I'm privileged in the position I'm in. I'm not a working class unemployed guy. I have a job, I have a voice in the media and so on. When somebody says that to you, I can tell you it's a pretty wrenching thing. And it is a question that a lot of us have asked. What do we expect people to do? Those of us who have a voice in the media and who make arguments and politicians and so on, what do we expect people to do on the ground? Now, when they had their first demonstrations, they said things like, they had posters saying things like, Sharia persecutes women, and Sharia is against homosexuals and so on. I said, if those are the things you're going on, then that's great with me. That would be, if you were ever to have a grassroots movement opposed to these things, that would be the sort of thing you would hope they would do it on. But it's an extremely complex phenomenon because there have been investigations which have shown that they have extremists and BNP types in their ranks, but they have also shown they have tried to get such people out, and you have to give them the benefit of the doubt on some of that. They have tried, and it isn't easy, and it's a nascent grassroots starting off young movement, and they're learning some of the mistakes as they go along. And then on the other hand, there are also many people, there's a study that's coming out on Monday from the think tank Demos, showing that actually the majority of their supporters online and so on certainly aren't of a sort of nativist, type. They just hate what's happening. So I come back to this point really with them, that this is what happens when the mainstream loses. When the mainstream abandons its job. This is what happens. I mean, I hate to quote it in almost, it's a cliche, but this, as Yeats said, is what happens when the centre does not hold. The best lack all conviction, and the rest are filled with passionate intensity. That's the problem, and I think it should be, to me, treated with nuance, treated with care, and I hate the people in the media who simply see a group of working class white guys and think, excellent, we can call them Nazis, when they would never go into a mosque and see a group of Muslims and say, you're all Islamists. I hate that. But it requires enormous care, and it's going to require enormous care in the years ahead. And as I say, if they don't get in charge, if they don't get on top of the extreme Islamists, if they don't get on top of that, the EDL, and far worse, will be the sort of thing we will see far more of in Europe. And it will be a Europe that I think very few of us would want to be in.